The dream of the perfect weapon, March 1942, Peenemünde, West. Baltic coast. Germany. The Baltic wind howls across the test fields of Peenemünde. Salt air mixes with the metallic temps of fuel and grease. Inside a long, low hangar, a small team of German engineers hunch over a gleaming finned shape that looks more like a science fiction rocket than a bomb. Dr. Max Kramer, a slender man in round spectacles, adjusts the prototype's control fins. He's 37, quiet, methodical, and in his mind burns an impossible idea. What if bombs could steer themselves? Across the concrete floor, Luftwaffe officer Colonel Rudolf Krauss watches impatiently. "You promise me accuracy," he snaps. "But all I see is another toy for Gring's exhibitions." Kramer doesn't look up. "It won't miss," he replies simply. "Not if my radio link holds." Outside, technicians wheel a Dornier Do-217 bomber onto the strip. On its belly, a dummy version of Kramer's new weapon, codenamed Fritz X, gleams in the morning sun. Krauss crosses his arms. "It's heavy. It's 3,000 pounds. You'll never get altitude." Kramer smiles faintly. "It's the point. The higher we go, the longer I can guide it." They climb into the observation bunker. The bomber roars down the runway, lifts off, and banks out over the gray Baltic. The moment it reaches 20,000 feet, the call crackles through the radio. "Bomb away." Through field glasses, the observers see the silver-shaped tumble, flare tail igniting like a comet. In the bunker, a technician grips a joystick, sending coded pulses left, right, down. The bomb swerves in midair. Someone gasps. The dummy bomb streaks straight into the center of a wooden target barge 5 miles offshore. Silence, then applause. Nervous, unbelieving. Kramer lowers the headset, almost whispering to himself. "We have just changed the ocean." In Berlin that night, the report reaches the Reich Air Ministry. They approve full development. Codename Rüstal, SD-1400X. The engineers and the Iron Cross, summer 1943, Friedrichshafen, Germany. The factory floor of Rüstal AG vibrates with the rhythm of war. Sparks fly from welders' torches as metal fins are shaped and bolted into place. Each bomb, now fully armed, carries a 700-kilogram warhead, thick steel walls, closing enough explosive to tear through a battleship's armored deck. Dr. Max Kramer walks the line, clipboard in hand. He watches as technicians attach the delicate guidance receiver, a small, black box that will listen for radio signals from the bomber above. Every screw, every wire matters. One mistake, and the miracle weapon becomes just another dud, falling uselessly into the sea. A young assistant dieter, Hank, leans close. "Herr Doctor, they say the Führer himself wants to see the tests." Kramer doesn't answer. He's staring at a prototype hanging from a chain. He knows what this means. Soon, this machine will not hit wood. It will hit men. He signs the inspection sheet anyway. At night, he returns to his quarters and listens to BBC broadcasts through a hidden shortwave. He's not loyal to London or Berlin anymore, only to the physics of flight. But he wonders, as he often does, what happens when the laws of aerodynamics are applied to death. August 1943, Luftwaffe Airfield, Isters, southern France. The Mediterranean glows bronze at sunset. On the tarmac, 3 per kilograms 100, the elite unit chosen to wield the new weapon prepares for final training. Their aircraft, Dornier Do-217 K2 bombers. Each carry one Fritz X under the belly, secured with heavy cradles and cables. Captain Hans Dollar, the squadron leader, addresses his men. "You will be above 18,000 feet when you release. The bomb will glide. You will guide it with the joystick until impact. Do not lose sight. Do not lose signal. The Allies will think it's a miracle." Someone mutters, "A miracle from hell." Dollar laughs. "Then let hell open wide. The Luftwaffe is desperate. Sicily has fallen. Italy teeters on surrender. The Mediterranean wants the Axis lake as slipping from their grasp. Hitler demands a demonstration, something to remind the world that Germany still commands the skies. By September, they get their chance. Italian envoys have signed an armistice with the Allies. The proud Regia Marinatelli's navy is steaming toward Malta to surrender. Among them is the battleship Roma, flagship of the Italian fleet, carrying Admiral Carlo Bergamini and nearly 2,000 men. From their airfield near Marseille, the bombers of KG-100 take off into a clear blue morning. Each carries a single Fritz X, gleaming like a silver arrow beneath the fuselage. Below them, the Italian fleet moves through calm waters north of Sardinia, where that history's first precision-guided weapon is about to descend upon them. The bomb that could think September 9, 1943, off the coast of Sardinia. The sea is a sheet of blue glass. The kind of stillness that fools men into thinking war has taken a break. On the bridge of the battleship Roma, Admiral Carlo Bergamini studies the horizon through his binoculars. The morning light glints off the deck guns, the polished brass fittings, the white uniforms of the sailors. Italy has surrendered to the Allies only a day before. The fleet has orders to sail south and give itself up to the British peace, finally, after years of ruin. But peace is a fragile thing in 1943. At 15,000 feet above, the bombers of 3 per kilograms 100 are silent dots against the sun. Their engines hum in perfect synchrony, the sound lost in the wind. In the lead aircraft, Oberleutnant Heinrich Schmelter locks eyes on the distant formation of ships below. He flicks a switch, and the Fritz X, hanging beneath his Do-217, comes alive. Its tail fins twitch. Servos whirr faintly. Bomb-armed, his bombardier reports. Visual on target, Schmelter replies. Prepare to release. The bomb drops, clean, silent, almost graceful. It begins its glide toward the blue Mediterranean far below. Inside the cockpit, Schmelter grips the control stick. The signal light glows red. Connection active. Now, the Fritz X is his puppet. Through the optical sight, the bomb appears as a white speck, trailing smoke. Every second counts. He tilts the joystick, sending faint radio pulses through the FUG 203 Kel transmitter. Below, the bomb's tail fins respond instantly, shifting its course. It's not just falling, it's steering itself. From the deck of the Roma, the lookout spots a strange shimmer descending from the clouds. Air raid, he shouts. Klaxons wail across the ship. Anti-aircraft gunners sprint to their posts, craning their necks skyward. But the Fritz X is too high, too fast, too small. It comes straight down, unerringly. At 15:42 hours, it pierces Roma's deck near the forward turret. The warhead detonates deep inside, tearing through the armor as if it were paper. A flash of white fire erupts from the hull, followed by a column of smoke that rises 1,000 feet into the air. On the bridge, Bergamini is thrown off his feet. The ship groans a massive, metallic scream as fire races through the ammunition magazine. Seconds later, the second bomb strikes amidships. Roma's bow lifts. Her great guns tilt skyward. Men are blown overboard by the blast. Then, slowly, the battleship begins to break apart. At 16:12, she rolls to port, her propellers thrashing briefly in the air before she vanishes beneath the waves. Over 1,350 sailors perish, including Admiral Bergamini. From above, Schmelter watches through his scope. Explosion blooms like a flower of smoke and flame. Direct hit, his radio operator says. Schmelter doesn't answer. He only whispers, Gott im Himmel. He had just guided the world's first successful precision bombing strike in history. Below, the survivors cling to burning wreckage, staring upward at the empty sky. They had no idea what had hit them. The Allied navies will soon find out the ocean will never feel safe again. The shockwave across the sea, September 10, 1943. Allied Naval Command. Algiers I reports arrive in fragments, a coded radio transmission, a distress call that fades mid-sentence, then silence. The Italian battleship Roma, pride of the Regia Marina, has been sunk not by submarine or torpedo, but by something ... different. In the operations room, British and American officers crowd around the communications table. The Italian liaison officer is pale. No torpedoes, no dive bombers, he insists. It came straight from above, like it could see us. Commander John L. Hall of the U.S. Navy frowns. Bombs don't steer themselves, he says flatly. But they will soon learn otherwise. A few days later, aerial reconnaissance photographs confirm the pattern of destruction near vertical penetrations in the deck armor, too precise to be random. The hits are surgical, devastating. The Roma wasn't the only target. Her sister ship Italia had also been damaged, barely escaping annihilation. What the hell did the Germans use? Hall mutters. In Berlin, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels is already celebrating the weapon's success. German newsreels show vague footage of bombers over the Mediterranean, boasting of a new secret weapon that could strike with divine precision. The Allies dismiss it as exaggeration, but in private, they're alarmed. Back in Sardinia, the sea is still littered with oil and debris. Fishermen whisper about ghost fire that fell from the clouds, a weapon that seemed to chase the ships. Survivors speak of an explosion so sudden it left no time to react. For the engineers at Peenemünde, word of the Fritz X's success spreads quickly. In their underground workshops, men like Dr. Max Kramer, one of the project's key designers, gather around the wireless to hear the news. It worked, one of them says quietly, just as we predicted. Kramer nods, but there is no joy in his face, only exhaustion. He had been working on guided munitions since before the war, dreaming of a bomb that could think. Now, that dream has turned into a weapon that had killed over 1,000 men in a single strike. In his diary that night, he writes, "We have proven that control from the air is possible. But I cannot ignore the feeling that today we crossed a threshold, one from which there may be no return." Meanwhile, Allied intelligence begins a frantic race to uncover the secret. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park intercept Luftwaffe transmissions mentioning Kiel and Strasbourg, the names of 2 German cities. Analysts quickly realize these might not be places at all, but devices, the radio control systems used in the attack. Soon, orders go out across the Mediterranean. If you see a bomb falling straight, do not stand still. Change course immediately. Make smoke. Jam radio signals if possible. But that's easier said than done. The Fritz X can strike from heights beyond anti-aircraft range, a weapon designed for helpless targets. For the next 2 months, Allied convoys will learn to fear a single sound above all others. The faint, descending whine that came just before the impact. The siren song that faded too late. The world had entered a new kind of warfare. The age of guided death. The counterstrike, and the hunt for the invisible enemy. October 1943, Mediterranean theater. The sea had always been a battlefield. But now it had turned into something far more terrifying. A laboratory of destruction. Every ship's captain from Gibraltar to Alexandria sailed under a new shadow. The unseen hand that could guide death from 20,000 feet above. In the cramped radio room of the British cruiser HMS Uganda, the operators hunch over their consoles. The convoy below is calm, but the airmen above are restless. Suddenly, static crackles. A faint, rhythmic signal breaks through. "Commander, interference on the HF band. It's not ours." Seconds later, the first Fritz X falls. A blinding flash, a roar that shakes the hull, and then silence. Uganda shudders as her engine room erupts in flame. Men are thrown into the air. Others scramble to douse fires as water floods in. The Fritz X has struck again. This time, the Allies are ready to learn. From Cairo to London, a new intelligence initiative is launched, Operation Fern Signal, dedicated to decoding how the Germans are guiding their bombs. Theories flood in: homing beacons, radar reflection, even magnetic tracking. But then, a breakthrough. In November, a young RAF signals officer named Dennis Burnett intercepts a Luftwaffe training transmission in occupied France. The signal ISNT, a simple Morse code or radar ping. It's a continuous wave frequency, pulsing at precisely 48 MHz. Burnett reports, it's a manual control link. Someone is flying the bomb. For the first time, the Allies understand the truth. These are not smart bombs by magic or machine. They are piloted by radio from the bomber itself. The discovery triggers a new race: electronic countermeasures. The British begin developing airborne jammers, code-named Carpet, that emit random noise to confuse the bomb's receiver. Soon, RAF Wellington bombers fly escort for convoys, carrying bulky jamming sets that hum like angry beehives. Meanwhile, the Americans refine smoke tactics and evasive maneuvers. Ships learn to twist, weave, and turn the moment a bomb is spotted. Never sail straight, one captain writes. Even God can't steer what he can't predict. But the Luftwaffe isn't done. Guided weapons are now their obsession. Alongside the Fritz X, they deploy the Hs-293, a rocket-boosted glide bomb that skims low over the waves. Allied sailors call it the Screaming Ghost. The battle of technology intensifies. Over the Bay of Biscay, a Liberator bomber spots a German do 217 moments before release. The jammers activate, and for the first time, the bomb misses. It splashes harmlessly into the sea. In London, an officer at the Air Ministry circles a single phrase on the after-action report. The siren faded before it struck. A small victory, but symbolic. The tide is turning. And yet, in Germany, at Peenemünde, Dr. Max Kramer and his team continue refining their designs. If they can jam radio, he tells his engineers, we will remove radio. He sketches something on the chalkboard, a sleek, finned weapon that no longer needs human control. It will fly on its own, guided by gyros and internal logic. It will be faster, stronger, unstoppable. The prototype's name, V1 Vergeltungswaffe 1, the Vengeance Weapon 1. The age of the guided bomb had only just begun, and the next one would scream all the way to London. When the siren finally faded, winter 1943, spring 1945, from the Mediterranean to ruins of Europe, November 1943. 5 months after the Roma went down, the Mediterranean is a different ocean. Convoys hug coastlines. Destroyers cut zigzags across the waves. Radar screens glow, and airborne jammers hum like strange bees over each task force. The guided bomb that once moved like a ghost has met human cunning. The siren it made as it fell, that faint, descending whine that chilled men in their bunks and sailors on the bridge, begins to fade. On an Allied escort carrier, Petty Officer Thomas "Tommy" Ellis remembers the first time he heard it. He tells the story years later, voice halting. You could hear it before you saw the water boil, like someone pouring sand into a kettle. Then, boom. After Roma, we learned to make smoke, to turn, to jam. We learned to break that song. The sound of learning is not glamorous. It is the clatter of radio rooms and the white noise of jammers being bolted into bombers, the bitter coffee of late-night technicians, the hurried revisions of tactic sheets on command room tables. British and American signal corps refine the art of interference. The Kell-Strasburg link, once the unseen hand guiding death, starts to tremble in the face of static and deception. Yet technology is stubborn and ruthless. The Germans try to adapt: new training schemes, alternate frequencies, deceptive maneuvers. Production lines churn out more Fritz the 10th units. But there are limits: alloy shortages, Allied bombing raids, and the simple arithmetic that innovations cannot be mass-produced overnight. Fewer than 1,400 Fritz X units are ever manufactured. The weapon's terror is outsized compared to its numbers. In Sicily and along the Italian shore, survivors of the Roma and other struck vessels pull corpses from oil-slick waves. A sailor named Marco, one of the few who swims back to the floating wreckage, stares at the sky and mutters the name of a man he will never see again, Admiral Bergamini. The grief is blunt and immediate. Family chapels fill with white cloth and candlelight. Letters home cease to be routine. They have become small, fragile relics. Back in Germany, the men who made the weapon carried different burdens. Dr. Max Kramer, his name now whispered in both admiration and shame. Among his peers walks the factory halls with slower steps. He has seen blueprints turned into a machine that can end thousands of lives in a single afternoon. On cold nights, he writes pages into a leather notebook. Not technical diagrams, but questions. Did we create precision or doom? Will history call this genius or atrocity? He is not alone. Some engineers volunteer for frontline units, refusing to watch their tools of death from safe distances. Others burn blueprints as Allied bombers dive toward their plants. A junior technician, Dieter Hank, writes to his sister that he cannot unsee the faces that the weapon has taken. The handwriting is uneven. He will not live to be reunited with that sister. And yet the story is not one of victory for either side. By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe's strategic situation collapses. Fuel runs low. The bomber crews who once guided the Fritz X find themselves shot down over occupied France, or unable to fly because there is nothing left to fly. The guided bomb that once promised to make every ship vulnerable is a weapon hamstrung by logistics and the Allies' growing mastery of the electronic battlefield. In the rubble of a southern French airfield, Allied troops uncover crates marked with German stencils. Inside, neatly packed, lie guidance receivers, tail fins, instruction manuals in neat German script. An RAF intelligence officer flips through a manual and writes in his notebook, "Pilot controls. Kell and Strauberg sets. Radio link, manual guidance from release to impact." The technology is catalogued, photographed, and shipped to labs in England and the United States, where scientists open the skull of the machine like surgeons. They are clinical, fascinated. The same machines that bereaved men now promise to make other wars shorter and less ambiguous, if, indeed, such a promise exists. By the time Berlin falls in 1945, the Fritz X is a spent curiosity. A few intact units survive in museums, boxed beneath glass. In the Smithsonian and in the Pima Air Museum, they will later sit as cold exhibits, an aluminum shell with fins, a plaque that reads the dates and weights, a label that says only so much. Visitors take photos. A child reaches through a guided touchscreen to spin a 3D model. The horror fades into education. The edge dulls, but memory remains jagged. Survivors of the Roma die with the image of fire in their eyes. Families of the lost speak of cold water and the smell of fuel. The Luftwaffe crews who flew the missions carry shame and, for some, a strange pride in a tool that worked so well. Historians will later debate the tactical impact of the Fritz X, whether it altered naval doctrine, whether it sped the war's end, or whether it was an early whisper of modern guided munitions. There is one final, uncomfortable lesson that both sides carry. Technology can magnify talent and terror in equal measure. The Fritz X was not simply a new weapon. It was a test case for the moral calculus of mechanized death. For the engineers and pilots who made it, it asked whether precision necessarily meant righteousness. For the sailors and sailors' families who paid the price, it posed a different question. Can any weapon be acceptable when its first success is measured in lives extinguished? On a bleak November afternoon, years later, Dr. Kramer visits a British museum where a Fritz X is on display. He stands before the glass and reads the plaque aloud like a prayer. His voice cracks. He wants to say he is sorry, but the apology is private. The glass keeps the world orderly. The past remains messy. Outside, a child points at the bomb. "Look, a rocket," she says. Her father sighs and pulls her away. The siren song is now a lesson in a history class, not an immediate terror. But every time a new weapon arrives, someone will remember the way the sea went still before the strike. Someone will recall the faces on the decks. Someone will ask, again, whether the price paid for precision was too high. Echoes in the jet age post-war Europe, 1946 to 1950, the war is over. The cities are rubble. The laboratories that once built instruments of annihilation are now silent or repurposed. Scientists in Germany, Britain, and the United States sift through crates of abandoned blueprints like archaeologists studying the bones of a lost civilization. Among them, the Fritz X is a curiosity, a relic of a time when men steered death by hand. Yet to the trained eyes of military engineers, it is something else entirely, a glimpse of the future. In London, engineers at the Royal Aircraft Establishment in Farnborough disassemble one of the recovered bombs. Its fins still gleam under the dust. You could guide this from 12 miles up, one of them murmurs. Remarkable. A younger technician sketches the tail mechanism on a notepad. He doesn't realize he's tracing the ancestry of every precision-guided bomb that will come after. In Washington, at Wright Field, American analysts do the same. They test the radio control system, the servo motors, the aerodynamic fins. Engineers from Bell, North American, and Boeing sit in on the evaluations. The notes are clear, practical, controllable, effective decades ahead of its time. Across the Atlantic, the Soviets too have captured their share of German secrets. In a cold hangar outside Moscow, engineers reverse-engineered the control system, building their own experimental glide bombs. The Cold War has barely begun, and already the ghost of Fritz X is alive again in different languages under different flags. Meanwhile, for the men who built it, there is no pride left to claim. Dr. Max Kramer, under interrogation and later employment by Allied authorities, finds himself in a peculiar limbo. He is not a prisoner, but he is not free either. His knowledge is valuable, his conscience less so. When asked whether he regrets his work, he pauses for a long moment. Regret, he says quietly. I regret that I succeeded. He is offered a contract in France to work on experimental aircraft control systems, a sanitized name for guided missile development. He accepts. He must live, and this is what he knows. But at night, he writes letters to no one. In one, found years later among his papers, he confesses, "It is strange. We built a weapon to end ships, but what we really built was an idea that a man could strike his enemy without seeing his face." Back in Italy, memorials rise along the Sardinian coast. The name Roma is carved in white marble above the harbor at Civitavecchia. Veterans gather each September 9th. They stand in silence as the Navy band plays Il Silenzio, and a single wreath is lowered into the sea. The family still asks questions. Why no warning? Why so sudden? For years, survivors of the Roma will tell the same story. How the sky seemed empty. How the sea was calm. How the weapon found them as if it knew their names. They call it fate. The engineers call it progress. The historians call it the dawn of the precision age. In truth, it was all three. By the early 1950s, the lessons of the Fritz X had seeded a new generation of weapons. The bullpup, the walleye, the homing torpedo, and later, the tomahawk. The idea that began in Peenemünde of guiding a bomb toward its target from afar became the foundation of an entire doctrine, smart warfare. But buried in the archives of Allied command are handwritten memos from naval officers who lived through the early days of the terror. One reads, "No matter how precise a bomb becomes, it will always strike something imperfect because it strikes us." The Fritz X had vanished from the seas. But its echo lived on in every missile and drone that followed. The world had learned to steer destruction with the turn of a dial. The siren had faded only to rise again in a new form. Legacy of the silent weapon Peenemünde. 1960 and beyond, a cold wind sweeps across the abandoned test fields of Peenemünde. the birthplace of so many of Hitler's Wunderwaffen. The hangars stand hollow, their roofs half-collapsed, their walls tattooed with decades of salt and rust. Grass grows through the concrete. A gull circles lazily above what was once the proving ground of the Fritz X. An old caretaker makes his rounds, boots crunching over broken glass. In the distance, a rusted launch rail juts from the earth like a fossil. Few visitors come here now, and those who do are scholars or soldiers, men who know that history's monsters daren't sleep. They rust. On one of the walls, faded German script still reads, "Precision ist unsere Macht." Precision is our power. Those words have outlived the Reich that painted them. By 1960, both the United States and the Soviet Union are testing guided missiles that can strike cities continents away. In Huntsville, Alabama, Werner von Braun gives a lecture to a group of young engineers. A slide shows early German designs, the Fritz X, the V1, the V2. "We were engineers," he says carefully. "Our work was to solve problems of flight." Others chose how that flight was used. The audience applauds, but a few in the back exchange glances. The line between creation and destruction has always been thin, and in wartime, invisible. Across the Atlantic, in Moscow's design bureau, OKB-52, Soviet scientists trace similar lineage. The documents they study bear stamps from captured German laboratories. "We are continuing history," one remarks dryly, not rewriting it. In post-war Germany, Dr. Kramer lives quietly in Bonn. He lectures at a university on aerodynamics, teaching students who have never known war. One day after class, a student asks, "Professor, is it true you worked on a bomb that could steer itself?" Kramer hesitates. He looks at the floor, then at the curious faces before him. "Yes," he admits softly. "We thought it was progress. It was something else." He dies in 1986. The same year, the United States deploys the AGM-65 Maverick, a laser-guided missile whose design philosophy directly descends from his own experiments. His papers, neat, technical, emotionless, are filed in archives labeled Missile Guidance, Early Work. Few who read them know his name. But the sea remembers. Every September, the Italian Navy lays wreaths over the resting place of the Roma. Divers descend into the deep and find her hull split wide, her decks frozen in silence. Rust curls along her guns. Inside her engine rooms, a clock stopped at 1612 still clings to a corroded bulkhead the moment she died. And above, the Mediterranean sparkles, serene, almost forgiving. The men who died aboard Roma are not forgotten, though their killer remains invisible. A signal from the sky, a whisper of innovation turned into tragedy. If you stand on the cliffs of Sardinia and listen closely when the wind shifts, the sea still seems to sigh. Some say it's only the waves. Others swear they hear something else, a faint descending whistle fading into silence. The siren that once haunted the Mediterranean is gone, but its echo lingers in every guided weapon that flies today, in every missile that leaves its rail, every drone that hums unseen above a battlefield. The world has inherited both the brilliance and the burden of that invention. And the question that haunted those who built it, can precision ever be innocent, still hangs unanswered, drifting over the waters where Roma sleeps.